2026 will mark 30 years since Duke Nukem 3D touched down. The 11th of October 2026 will mark 10 years since Duke Nukem 3D World Tour Edition released, the last major outing in the Duke Nukem franchise. At the time, I remember a lot of Duke Nukem fans were enthusiastic about the franchise's future. The hope being that a decent showing for World Tour Edition could bring the franchise back into focus and encourage everyone involved to do something with it. Unfortunately, that did not happen, Duke only making a brief cameo as part of Bulletstorm's full clip edition and re-releasing various Duke Nukem games onto smaller platforms. That's really been it for Duke over the last decade. I've already made a video lamenting the state of the franchise, how it got there and the piss-poor handling of it, with many other Duke Nukem fans showcasing their frustration and annoyance with the state of play on YouTube. It's very well worn ground to talk about that, and justifiably so I think. But it's one thing to lament the way things have played out. In this video, I want to look at the future and ponder on one simple question. What's next for Duke Nukem? Duke Nukem is a very interesting franchise to discuss. Once among the most noteworthy characters in video games, his collapse and seemingly endless tumble into the void of irrelevancy has not been stopped by all those charged with handling the franchise. I believe no video game franchise is truly dead if there's money to be made from it, and I definitely believe Duke Nukem has a future. What that future is very much up in the air. There's rumours, there's hope, and then there's disappointment. In this discussion, I want to talk about what I think is coming next for Duke Nukem, and if I think the franchise can get out of the hole it's buried 6 feet under. The smart money for the next major thing with Duke Nukem as a franchise will probably come in 2026, I believe. The aforementioned 30th anniversary of Duke Nukem 3D begs for some kind of remaster or re-release. It's just the way the industry is in 2025. And being truthful, there's no universe where I don't see some kind of compilation, re-release or Kex-powered Duke Nukem 3D coming out to celebrate that milestone. 20th anniversary will be 10 years old, and in video game terms that's practically archaic. If you were to pull me on what I think it will look like, I think that last option I mentioned is probably the best guess. Night Dive Studios is the go-to house these days for re-releases of old-school first-person shooters, and the fact that they've already worked on Blood twice, which runs on the build engine, showcases they have experience of handling the build engine. It wouldn't surprise me if they released a Kex-flavoured Duke Nukem 3D, likely featuring the expansion packs left out of World Tour, Life's a Beach, Duke It Out in DC, and Nuclear Winter. What makes me think this is going to happen is that they haven't been added to World Tour, despite Randy mentioning a few years back that he was actively working on that. It leads me to suspect that they're destined to be used to beef up the appeal of whatever new bundle they've got in the oven. It also needs to be stated that the developers of World Tour, Nerve Software, have long since disbanded, and thus there's no one to maintain that port. On top of this, you have a lot of expansions and level sets that could be added in to help add to the appeal. Duke Extreme features 50 levels and new enemies. It was developed by Sunstorm Interactive, and while the quality is all over the place, it was a retail expansion for Duke that hasn't made it into previous releases. You've also got the PlayStation 1 exclusive level set Plug and Play, which brings in some very interesting experiences that apes on some of the early PlayStation 1 franchises. Now, I'm not a particular fan of this one, but it is part of Duke Nukem's history, and thus it would be an interesting addition to any compilation. Another possible addition would be the Duke 64 levels, which, in my opinion, are among the best ways to experience Duke Nukem 3D levels, expanded and more thought out. I feel these levels really are an underrated gem in the Duke 3D canon. I think a lot of modern gamers would delight in being able to dive into these in an official capacity. There's also other ways they could sweeten the deal: Duke Nukem Advance, Lame Duke, or allowing gamers the chance to put their own levels and custom creations into the game, much like Night Dive has allowed with Doom, Heretic and Hexen in the last few years. It wouldn't even surprise me if Night Dive did what they normally do and create their own level set, complete with new levels and enemies thrown in. Basically what I'm saying here is that there's enough dormant content within the franchise for Night Dive to pull together an ultimate bundle, which re-releases all that under one umbrella. It's what they've been doing for major re-releases in the last few years, so I definitely wouldn't be surprised if they ended up doing that. Of course, it might not be Night Dive, but even if it isn't, I do foresee some attempt to bring Duke Nukem 30th anniversary into the fold with some kind of compilation. I'll be very surprised if we get to the end of 2026 and we don't see something like that. The problem with all this discussion, obviously, is that re-releasing the same game over and over doesn't do much to push the franchise forward. In fact, you could argue that re-releasing Duke Nukem 3D again is just a bandage on the bigger problem. The series needs new content. In the 1990s, there was an avalanche of Duke Nukem spin-off games across multiple platforms. These games helped to expand the appeal of the franchise and also tempered gamers while they waited for Duke Nukem Forever. There's also the fact that Duke Nukem Forever did leave the door open for a potential follow-up. At the end of Duke Nukem Forever, Duke announces his intention to run for the presidency of the United States. Now, personally speaking, I would rather they did not follow up Duke Nukem Forever with a sequel. Instead, I'd rather the series started over from a creative point of view. The direction of the character, the lazy plot, and the tired antics of the people within the world of Duke Nukem Forever blew away any goodwill the series had built up. To be clear, Duke Nukem had a decent story in its first few outings, which Forever tried to pick up in the DLC The Doctor Who Cloned Me, which in itself is markedly better than the base Duke Nukem Forever game. The problem is that nobody cared. Nobody wanted to come back and experience DLC for a game that left such a bad taste. They could have released the best Duke Nukem DLC ever, and only a handful of people would have bothered turning up. That's just the way that Duke Nukem Forever caused things to be. And truthfully, creatively, the franchise also seems to have run out of steam, and that's a big problem. Duke Nukem as a franchise needs to get back to its roots, a phrase commonly thrown out in these situations, but it's highly relevant here. The series needs to get back to being gameplay first and not trying to force every meta joke into its runtime. If a new Duke Nukem game ended up being first person, I've always said that Ion Fury showcases the way forward for Duke Nukem as a franchise. Duke Nukem does not need to be a AAA franchise. In the modern gaming scene, that only sets it up for failure. Bloated budgets, bloated expectations. Duke Nukem Forever fell right into that trap, and it's arguably why it ended up being so poorly received. I understand that everyone who's got a hand in this franchise does not want to invest their time in a non-AAA franchise, but I'm pretty sure there are plenty of studios out there who would give anything to be given the chance to make Duke Nukem relevant again. For me, it feels like a lack of will or desire is stopping this from happening. That's all. For me, that is the only reason why this hasn't happened already. I personally believe there are plenty of people who would buy a new Duke Nukem game if it released. I just believe that those in charge of the franchise don't have the desire for it. It's nothing to do with politics or anything like that. And the reason I say that... The other ongoing situation with the Duke Nukem franchise is that weird Adi Shankar animated series that he snapped the rights up to in early 2025. His previous work includes the Castlevania and Devil May Cry Netflix series, two outings that are controversial among their own game fan bases. With Duke Nukem, he explicitly stated that his vision for the new Duke Nukem adaptation will be a middle finger to everybody, and will be made without corporate interference. When Duke Nukem blew up, everyone tried to turn it into a brand, when really it was just a middle finger. Duke Nukem can't be made by a corporate, because the moment a corporation makes Duke Nukem, it's no longer Duke Nukem. I don't intend on having anyone tell me what to do with this one. If you've watched any of his series on Netflix, you'll know that Adi likes to wander way off the established canon within the game adaptations he makes, so we can probably expect the same thing with Duke Nukem. For years, the idea of a Duke Nukem movie has been floated, and I personally always felt that was the way to go for Duke. His macho, over-masculine persona seemed suited to an over-the-top Hollywood flick that went all in on the action part of the movie, but series like Peacemaker have made me rethink that. Also slightly to do with the fact that I feel John Cena would have made an excellent Duke Nukem. I believe that if a TV series fleshed out Duke Nukem appropriately, framed him as an over-the-top vigilante in a world that moved beyond him and his antics, then I feel there's a lot of room for potential there. There's no reason to change the character, but changing the world he inhabits and the attitudes towards him could make for an excellent fun in a TV show, and let fans have fun with the character while also giving writers the chance to explore the nuances of it. You could even use those earlier adventures of Duke Nukem as a way to frame the whole thing. My problem is that I don't think the animated show will go in that direction. Like I said earlier on, I suspect that we're going to get something that isn't quite Duke Nukem or the Duke Nukem that fans really want. It's going to be something that's more catered towards a wider audience, something that can be sold on Netflix. The last thing I want though is something similar to the recent Tomb Raider animated series, which made a bunch of weird choices that managed to frustrate longtime fans of the game, both old and new, quite the thing in the modern era, while also failing to capture a new audience. It just made everyone frustrated with the experience and failed to take off in a notable way. I'm always willing to give these kind of things a chance, however, my optimism is not that high. Ultimately, the fate of Duke Nukem is in the hands of those who control the franchise. Randy certainly hasn't been in a rush to make things happen with Duke Nukem over the last few years, and those around him haven't been eager to take up the challenge. For me, I feel there's a lot of potential within the Duke Nukem franchise still. I know a lot of people say they would like to see it left in the past, but for me, it could have a bright future. It just needs the right vision to bring it all together. As I said at the start of this video, I believe no video game franchise is ever truly dead these days. There's always attempts to bring things back to life, and I feel that Duke Nukem is a franchise that's primed to be put in that position. If anything's going to happen though, it's going to be in 2026, and I feel that's going to be a make or break year for the franchise as a whole. We'll just have to see what 2026 brings to the table, but I for one am optimistic that we'll get something interesting to talk about during the next year. Feel free in the comments to tell me what you think the franchise should do next. Which direction do you think it's going to go in, and are you looking forward to that animated TV series? And if you noticed my voice was a bit croaky in this video, yes, I am still getting over a fairly bad flu.